So we're in Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 2, page, we're in the midst of pages 1147 through 1149. We're moving now to Tzadik Daled, with the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe, the son of the Rebbe Rashab, is citing and explaining these pages. Actually, literally the bottom of page 1147. In Tzadik Daled, it's page 52. So yesterday I did more of a review and just showed the context. Now we'll learn it inside. So overall, let me just sum up as follows. We're talking about the fundamental interface between Atzmus, Yesh Amiti, and how God chose to create the process, the creative process. Keep this in mind, the creative process. Built in Mitzias Nimtza, Mitziusim Atzmuse, built in Mitzias Nimtza, Mechuyev HaMitzias, which is the best descriptions, quote unquote, we can't even call it descriptions, but somewhat give us a sense of Atzmus's exclusivity and uniqueness, that there's only one God. Remember, only one God, one Atzmus. Everything else we learned, even the things that seem emes, they're not kamitose. Remember the Rambam. Hu levadei ha'emes. He is the only absolute true existence and reality. Everything else is put there. It may be godly in his personality, but it's still put there. Something created it. Something chose to put it there. So therefore, it's preceded by its creator. That's Atzmus, Hu levadei ha'emes. Whether we talk about the Yesh, which clearly is a creation, even though it's created in a way that it gives us some sense of what Atzmus is like, Mitziusim Atzmuse, but it's a creation. And also, and so the Rambam says, this first shlila, if you remember, he negates, Ein achar emes kamitase, Ein la'achar emes kamitase, nothing else. He's talking about the Yesh, the power of Atzmus in creation. Even the power of Atzmus in creation is, emes gomer is completely true, but it's not as true as Atzmus, who's beyond that as well. And the second negation was ve'ein motzei emes milvadei kamese, that there is no other existence. And he says that's oir, even oir, which reflects all of Atzmus, is also not milvadei kamese, is still not all of Atzmus, because Atzmus is far beyond that, as we learned. So whatever we've learned, and any questions you have, has to go back to the context of this whole theme. Nothing here is standing alone. It's all following and assuming that we spent around 30 classes, which means over 30 hours, discussing this distinction between Atzmus and Oir and Yesh. So it's a given. If for whatever reason you're not understanding it well, just go back to those classes, read it inside. I went 30 classes, I don't want to go over it again and again. You have to do your work. You do your work, you'll understand it better and better slowly. Take your time and patience. Now we're moving to the next level. He's talking now about the Ayin. So we have the Yesh HaNivra, Yesh HaMiti, that's Atzmus. And with all the elaboration I just summed up. There's Yesh HaNivra, the creation. Now the process in between. How did God put into play this process in a way that can make sense to us to some extent, and in a way that we can retrace the steps? So we explained there's an Ayin. The Ayin is the channel generally called Oir, Oir Ein Sof, and this Oir, this Ayin, divides into two. One is the Ayin that reflects the essence, so it's like, so to speak, represents the essence, and that's all it is. It's just a reflection of the essence, so it's exactly like the essence. Me'ena etzem. However, it's not the essence, it's Oir. And the second level is the Oir is relating to what Atzmus wants, which is existence. So in the Oir, you basically have an Oir that's reflective of the source, and the Oir that is beginning to associate what he calls a shayach le'elemus. This is called etzem ha'Oir, hispashtus ha'Oir. Etzem ha'Oir does not have yet hamshacha. The only hamshacha it is it's a reflection, an extension from Atzmus. But it doesn't have within itself, it remains completely not revealed, not extending, because all it is reflection of Atzmus. Now you could ask, doesn't Atzmus want creation? So why shouldn't this Eir also reflect that? The fact is, it's going to travel through this Eir. Absolutely. Because this Eir reflects everything Atzmus wants. But in practicality, in functionality, the Eir is all, that's why I called it the chief of staff. It doesn't care about the details because all it is just carrying the message. The next level of Eir is now has to begin to engage, relatively speaking. Remember, as I explained at length as well, all this is Lifnei Tzimtzum. So because of before the Tzimtzum, it's still all essentially in the divine consciousness. But subtly, when you break it down, you have to say, or the way, at least the way God made it, is that there are levels relatively, as I spoke the other day from the Rebbe's letter, relatively there are levels that will be the root of the levels that will actually become manifest after the Tzimtzum. So now it's all still in the producer's planning. It's producers, if you want, expression. So there's an expression that's non-expression. There's an expression that's an expression that begins to relate to Shaykh al-Elamis, and he says, in that level, there you can start talking about Ratzon, a desire, Ratzon ha-kloli, Ratzon ha-prati, and Ratzon ha-kodem. 3 levels. A general desire, there's already hiserus, an awakening, some stimulation, but it's very general, but it's there, it's an absolute desire. Then 2 is the details, what he wants. And 3 is actually allocating and what I say, envisioning and allocating and preparing the resources needed to fulfill that desire. Now, we're going to move now back to Tzadik Dalet. And Tzadik Dalet, after explaining that there is, that an Eir is subject to diminishment, that's why you could have 2 levels in Ayin. The whole beginning of the explanation on page 1147 is why in Eir, how, he says, Siba says Chalkus Ayin. How could this Ayin, what causes this Ayin to split into parts? Is because the Ayin is Eir, and Eir is not Atzmi, and Eir is subject to diminishment. That means even the Eir Atzmi, which reflects Atzmus, and it itself is like Atzmi. But since it's Eir, it's subject to be able to continue its journey. And so Atzmus, you can't say that on Atzmus. On Atzmus, you can't say that as it extends, it becomes diminished or becomes relates. Atzmus is Atzmus, like he said, Atzmi cannot be divided. But the Eir Atzmi, you can say, has 2 aspects to it. One of it reflects Atzmus. It tells us that Atzmi does not divide, but the Eir itself is Eir. As a reflection, even the Eir that's within the sun is already not the sun. And therefore, that Eir is going to be the beginning of the Eir that extends from the sun. If you want to use that physical example. Same thing here. Eir Atzmi right now, it's Eir Atzmi, meaning is the etzem of what Eir is, but it's still Eir. So on one hand, it's completely just reflective of its source, but it's not the source, meaning Yesh Amiti. And it is subject, as he explains, so as he says that therefore there it can go, the Eir is Mismayit, so it begins as a Eir Atzmi, and this will then become Eir Mispashit. It will extend outward. So if you ask the question, is there a distinction between the sun, the light, the sunlight outside of the sun that travels to earth, and the sunlight within the sun? The answer is there's a difference in intensity. But at the end of the day, they're both light. They're both not the sun. So there's a difference in intensity. The sun, in the light in the sun is like the sun is saying, I am going to give off light. But the actual giving off of light and the transmission and the extension happens outside the sun as it travels outward. Now, obviously, as the Alter Rebbe says in Shari Yichud V'Amunah, the mashal is not accurate completely because the sun is actually not, the sunlight outside the sun is outside of the sun. Whereas the light that's mispashit, even creation is all within the sun. And that's where he goes into the whole Shem Elokim and so on. But the point being is that there are these levels. Okay. Now to explain this, he goes into Ratzon. Even though if you think in the order, it would continue, you'd want to hear more about Eir Atzmi and Eir Mispashit. But before the Rebbe Rashab goes into that, and the Friedrich Rebbe follows suit, he says, this is going to be understood through Ratzon. So we're moving now to Ratzon from Eir. And then we're going to move back to Eir. So Eir is just a field of energy. You can't even call it a Ratzon yet. Atzmi, for sure there's no Ratzon. Even Mispashit, that's where the Ratzon emerges. Okay. Now again, you could say God could have done all this without these levels. Yes, he could have. Atzmus could have simply said, I want creation, and there'd be no level. He just creates, and that's it. But he wants it to be understood by us, and we should relate to it, and we should be able to retrace the steps. That's vital. Every time you think about it, you must know that. Because these levels must be. But once they're there, they help us understand the process, and they help us recreate the process and retrace the steps back to the source. So I gave even examples in Aveda. If you remember, I gave the example, Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvesa v'tzivanu. That's just like Eir Atzmi. All it is Kedishanu b'mitzvesa v'tzivanu, God sanctifying us with his mitzvahs. I know it's Ratzon, but I'm just giving an example. Then when you say La'aniach Tfilin, or Lahadlik Ner Shabbos Kedesh, or L'Gveya Mezuzah, or whatever bracha you make, then you're talking about what does the mitzvah entail? So someone will say, what's more important? Putting the mezuzah, the specific details of putting the mezuzah on the door exactly this way, or that it's God's ratzon? The answer is both. It depends what you're focusing on. If you're focusing on the product, meaning what is the objective of the whole mitzvah, it's the actual mitzvah. You can't just say God sanctifies with doing mitzvahs. If you want to talk about the connection to God, then all the mitzvahs have something in common. They're all God's desire. Now that's ratzon, not oir, but nevertheless, there you see. And you could find in every area of life, you'll find, are we focusing on the detail or are we focusing on the big picture? So when the Mishkan was built, Moshe focused on the big picture. The big picture, that's why he first said to Kalim, build the vessels. Bitzalel, the architect, says to Moshe, that's not the derech elam, that's not the way you build. First you build the structure, then you bring the vessels. Then you put the vessels in there. You don't first build furniture and then you build a house. You first have the house, then you build the furniture to put it into the house. And Moshe agrees because Bitzalel was the architect. His job was implementation. In execution, the main thing is the specifics and exactly the order and all that. Moshe was the visionary. Moshe is the mamutza machaber. So he speaks what God wants. What's the kavanah is the kelim. The details, I leave it up to you how to actually do it. That's a good example between Eir Atzmi and Eir Mispashit in general terms. Obviously, it's not a perfect example. We're talking about human beings. We're talking on earth. But just to show the focus, it's two different focuses. Another example would be where we say in the beginning of Pasha Bahar. What does it say? When they will come to Eretz Yisrael, it says that they should create Shabbos LaHashem. Right? Talks about Shemitah. Then it says, Sheishanim tizu sadecha, v'sheishanim tiz merkamecha, v'shon hashviyis, v'shav sa'ara Shabbos LaHashem. So the Alter Rebbe asks the question, what's going on here? Why does it first begin? It tells us Shabbos LaHashem, Shemitah. 7th year, the sabbatical. Then it begins 6 years, you plant the seeds. You sow the fields. And you plant the vineyards. And then again it says Shabbos. Which one is it? Obviously, first you have to have the 6 years. Then you do Shemitah. And his answer is, if you talk about the kavanah, the intention is that should be Shemitah. The practical steps, that's 6 years. So he begins with what the kavanah is. So always everything begins with what is the atzmis de kavanah. What is the overall arching picture? In a way, that's what Etzem Ha'er conveys. Obviously, without any details yet. It's God's reflection. And then come the levels that begin to specify the steps, one step after another. Okay. So now he's going to go into Ratzon. On top of page 52, if you need the actual text, go to ayinbeis.com. It's all there in PDF. You can feel free to download it or look at it or view it. It's already there. Okay. So this is corresponding with the bottom of page 1147 in Ayin Beis. This is actually additional words that Frierdiker Rebbe adds to help the segue. To understand this that breaks into two ayins, two levels of ayin. And as he gave the example of the light of the torch, that when you're closer, it's more intense. When you're more distant, it's more diminished. And he hasn't yet discussed about atzmi yet. Just remember that. We know it from Ayin Beis. At this point, we don't know the words atzmi. We don't know mispashit. We just know that there's two levels in ayin. And that's possible, he said, because it's and is subject to diminishment. It's not atzmi. That's all we know right now. So please don't ask me questions about things we haven't learned yet. That we'll learn. But right now, he's going to explain this idea of what is and he's explaining it. He says, "V'yuvan zeh b'keiches hanefesh." The Rebbe Rashab just goes right into Rotzen. Frierdiker Rebbe adds a few lines of connection. That will understand this b'keiches hanefesh, with the faculties of the spirit, of the soul. B'keich harotzen.
Where are you?
The power of Rotzen. Because remember, Koyach HaRotzen is one of the faculties of the Nefesh. It's a makivdika faculty. It's just for the records, it's Koyches Makifim, Koyches Pnimim. Chachma Bina Das Chesed Gvura Teferes Netzach Chayid Yesed Malchus. They're called Koyches Pnimim. They're localized. They're specific. They are Eir in a Keli. All this we also learned in the beginning of Ayin Beis. Koyach HaRotzen is called a Koyach Klali or Koyach Makif because it's not localized. It's the Rotzen to use Chachma. It's the Rotzen to use Bina. So, but it's still a Koyach. So he says we're going to understand this with the Koyches HaNefesh and Koyach HaRotzen.
Where are you?
On the top of page 52 in Ayin Tzadik Dalet. The Ima Yesei Muvdal. Be'erech Mekol HaKoyches, that even though it's removed in relation to all the faculties, as I just said, Rotzen, you can't compare Rotzen to other faculties. Rotzen is a desire. So it's removed in the sense, it's not localized, it's not in any direct, it's removed in the sense it's above all the faculties. But Kol Mokum is Galus HaKeichus V'Ayidei Rotzen Dafka. So even though it is removed in the sense because it's above them, but on the other hand, all the faculties are revealed only through Rotzen. If you want to learn, study with your mind, it's not enough to have a mind. It's not enough to have Chachma Bina Das. You need a Rotzen to activate Chachma Bina Das. If you don't have the desire to do it, the faculties remain there. They could just remain silent and not effective. So Rotzen is the driving force, is the catalyst that gets the faculties moving. Same thing, you can walk, your feet allow you to walk, but you have to want to walk. So Rotzen, he says, on one hand, it's removed from the faculties because that's exactly why it has the power to command them. On the other hand, it is the driving force. The revealing of the faculties is galus. It doesn't create the faculties. You have faculties without Rotzen, but they're not activated, they're not revealed. But Adarabah, and on the contrary, because it's removed from them, that's why it has the power to affect them, to reveal all of these faculties. For example, Chochmah Mechin does not have the power to stimulate Midas. Let me explain what I mean by that. Obviously, we know when we contemplate, it gives birth to emotions. But it could also not give birth. My point being is the koiches don't control one another. They affect one another. Rotzen is like, if you think of Rotzen as, we talked about chief of staff, or think of Rotzen as the captain of the ship. Rotzen expresses that which the nefesh desires, and it says, you now, tells each function, each of the faculties, you do this and that. Precisely because as a high superior power, it's like in a superior in the hierarchy, therefore it has the power to tell and the ability to tell the faculties to be revealed. So if a person is lazy, let's say, and doesn't want to use his mind, or doesn't want to do anything else, the Rotzen has the power to overpower and say, no, do it. And if you don't have a Rotzen, as strong as the faculty may be, and as compelling as the situation may be, you could end up not doing anything. So you need a commander, essentially. We learned in the first volume at length, he spoke about how Ratzon is machriach hakoiches. Machriach doesn't mean it forces it like slave labor, but it means it doesn't ask the koiches, do you want or don't you want? I'm the decider. Ratzon is not a partner with the faculties and saying, you know what, let's sit down and let's determine, are we going to right now learn Torah? Are we going to use Chabad Shebenefesh? Are we going to study? Are we going to use Chesed? Am I going to go give tzedakah now? Or am I going to be kind to another? It's not a discussion. The Ratzon says so, it happens. The Ratzon doesn't say so, it won't happen. So the Ratzon has that exclusive power, that ability to desire. Now, we don't usually think about it much, but whenever you see someone, like the famous story with the Baal Shem Tov, that they were learning Torah, they were sitting in a Beis Medrash learning, and some wagon driver was passing by, his wagon got stuck in the mud. So he came into the window and said, can someone help me get unstuck? And they all said, no, we can't. So his response was, Choshish ve'ena moshish. Not that you can't, you don't want to. Don't say you can't. And the Baal Shem Tov learned a lesson in Russian from that. That Naved is the same thing. When people say, I can't do something, you can, you don't want to. Because if you wanted to do something, you do it. Why you don't want to? Okay, we have to figure out why. But don't say you can't. This is a common statement that Rebbe would use very often when people say, I can't do it. Can't do it. There was a shlucha from Australia once, the Rebbe asked her what she's doing and pushed her to do more. She says, I can't do it. The Rebbe says, you can't. You just don't want to. You have to work harder. So she said, I'll try my best. So the Rebbe said, I don't know about Australia, but in America, when you say I'll try my best, means you won't do anything. So you can't, but you don't want. Will is critical. This is a very critical point because I remember meeting somebody who he asked me questions. So I wanted to learn something with him. He says, I'm ADD. Or ADHD, the different versions. It means attention deficit. So it doesn't have enough attention. Now, I happen to know that the last Saturday night, he was a wealthy man. He was in Las Vegas and he loved to gamble. And he played blackjack. Blackjack was his thing. So I said to him, tell me, last Saturday night, where were you? He told me. I said, how many hours did you spend? He says, well, most of the night, from like 11 till 4 a.m. or something. I said, what happened to the ADD when you were sitting with blackjack? You know, how did you keep focused? He said, that I love to do. So suddenly when you love to do it and you want it, the ADD melts away somewhat. And when it comes to learning, obviously you don't have the same desire. So when people say they can't, obviously there are things we're not capable of doing. Someone's going to ask you to jump up 1,000 feet. Obviously we're not capable. It's not about desire. But there are many things that it's about Ratzon, not about the Keiches. The Keiches are there, and the Ratzon is not there completely. If we're going to do this as group therapy, I'll say that how many times have I heard from my teachers when I was in yeshiva, and I'd say, I can't. They say, you can, you're smart, and so on. You don't want to. And they were right. I wasn't driven. I wasn't energized. I was not excited. So when you're not excited, you obviously don't have a passion you don't want, so you don't do. Anyway, just to elaborate a bit on the power of Ratzon. So what he's saying here is that Ratzon has like a dual quality. On one hand, it's above the faculties. On the other hand, it is the cause that allows those faculties to be actualized. And on the contrary, because it's above them, that's why it has the power to poil dafki izgal shel kol hakeches. V'hainu, this means the eifem pulosei hu b'derech hechrech. He is using the word, that's back from Ayin Beis, volume 1. I'll soon point out where it is because what the Frierdiker Rebbe is going to do is an interesting thing. The Rebbe Rashab just referred to the Maimer on bottom of 1147. He referred to the Maimer Kiseitse Ha'alef in volume 1, page 106. The Frierdiker Rebbe is actually not just going to refer to it, he's going to actually cite it and quote it. So the next few pages is actually from chapter 64 and 65 in Ayin Beis. So he's combining the Ayin Beis we're learning here on page 1147 through 1149 And at the same time, he's also combining it with language from the Ayin Beis back then that the Rebbe Rashab refers to, but doesn't cite for obvious reasons. Doesn't have to repeat what he already wrote. But the Friedrich Rebbe does. So right now he's going into Ayin Beis, volume 1. The Maimer is Atem Netzovim, actually, chapter 64, if you want to look it up in Ayin Beis. So what does he say? That the Eifim Poloshe, so therefore, the way Rotzen effectuates, the way Rotzen impacts the faculties is b'derech hechrech. It's not b'derech, it's not consulting with the faculties. And it's not advising with them. It's not in the partnership. It's hechrech. It's telling them this is what you do. Now remember, hechrech doesn't always mean a bad thing. In this case, the Rotzen is that's its authority. The faculties are the powers that we have. Those are the actual resources we have. The Rotzen is the force, like I said, the captain of the ship, if you wish, or the one that has the authority to say, now do it. So it's b'derech hechrech. It's compelling the faculties to do it. And that's why the Rotzen affects them all equally. So what's the logic? Very simple. When the captain orders the engine room to rev up the engines, or orders the one at the wheel to turn the ship this way, it's all his order. Doesn't make a difference what the order is. They all have to listen. If it was a partnership and a discussion, a consultation, and the captain sits down and says, okay, let's discuss what we're going to do, then there's a difference. He listens to his advisors, he listens to the people who are experts, and so on. But Rotzen is not functioning that way. Rotzen's role is authoritative, and therefore it's an equalizer. If it tells you to walk, you walk. If it tells you to open your eyes, you open your eyes. If it tells you to sit down and use Chabad, Chochmah Bina Das, to learn and study, that's what you do. So the Rotzen is a compelling force that is an equalizer. It affects everything equally. If you remember the page before in Tzadik Daled, he spoke about the Etzem HaNefesh. That's the Chayes HaNefesh is also that way. It equalizes. No difference between the head to the toenail. But here we're not talking about Chayes. We're talking about Rotzen. So the comparison would be Chayes, Etzem HaChayes HaNefesh is Oir. Hispashtus HaChayes is the second level of Oir. That's how each faculty has its particular energy. There's different energy in the brain than there is in the heart, than there is in the feet. But the life force is equal from head to toe. You don't say your head is more alive than your feet. No matter how much more functions there are, everything is alive. It's an equal force. Rotzen, which is a faculty of the nefesh, but it's not a specific faculty. It's a makif, has the power. It compels and equalizes everything. For Yadua, this is actually where the Perek, where Ayin Beis, he starts citing. This is Ayin Beis, chapter 64, from V'Yadua, I believe. For Yadua, the Berotzen, he has Beis Madreges. So again, the Friedrich Rebbe is going now into a longer analysis of Rotzen. The Rebbe Rashab did it to some extent, and we discussed it. And some of what I explained is taken actually from here, but we're going to learn it now inside. So be patient, because he's not coming back to the two levels of Ayin so fast. He's going to first analyze Rotzen now, desire. So it says, V'Yadua, it's known, and it's known. The Berotzen, in desire. Just for the record, Rotzen can be translated will as well. The willpower, will. Desire, I use desire, I don't know, it just comes more natural to me. But it could be confusing, because then we say Tainug is pleasure. Tainug sounds more like desire, and Rotzen sounds more like will. So in the actual translations that I found, it's usually Tainug Rotzen is pleasure and will, or desire and will. But if you really know the language English, desire is more, really associates more. When you desire something, desire doesn't necessarily mean you have pleasure, you just want it. So the semantics here, don't let it confuse you. I'm just using a word. We can use any word that you like. So I just wanted to clarify. We're not talking about Tainug here. We're talking about Rotzen. So will, desire are interchangeable. If somebody has another word, fine. I mean, those are the two words I usually use. So he says, "V'yadua." Okay, so there's two levels in this rotzen, in this will, desire. Rotzen hanelam for rotzen hagoli. A concealed desire and a revealed one, and a revealed desire. Oi, another way of explaining it, koyach harotzen, the power of desire, v'rotzen, an actual desire. This is Ayin Beis, volume 1, chapter 64. It's word for word from there. But the Rebbe Rashab cited it, he referred to it. And the Frierdiker Rebbe is elaborating on it. So two names, either Rotzen Hanelam or Rotzen Hagoli, concealed or revealed, or the power of desire and desire. So in other words, the power of desire is somewhat like the concealed desire. Obviously, it's a little different because the power of desire, you could say it's not yet, you don't even want it yet. It's just the ability to want it. That's why he makes there's two different descriptions. We'll see where it goes. So he's going to explain. Ha'alef, the first level. Hurotzen mamish. It's an actual desire, an actual will. The hainu. What does that mean? Kishiyachbeitz be'eze dover. Okay. This is why I said yachbeitz, chayfetz is yet another word. So you have tainug, chayfetz, rotzen. So which is which? Sometimes chayfetz is connected to tainug, but sometimes chayfetz is closer to rotzen. I've never seen them all three, but I would say probably tainug is the highest, pure pleasure. But remember, pleasure does not have hamshacha. Rotzen is a desire for something. Pleasure can be, you can have pleasure and not want. Chayfetz is something in between. Sometimes it says chayfetz is primius harotzen, something like that. So anyway, he's using the yod yachbetz. In this case, I would translate as when he desires something.
It's the opposite order, right?
Well, tainug, everything starts from tainug, but here he's not going into that. It's tainug chayfetz rotzen. That would be the order. Here he's saying like that when one desires anything, any item, any object, anything, when one desires something, ad shetimshach hanefesh elov mamish, ad shetimshach timoshech. Let me just read a second to myself, just with the right tone. No, let me change the tone a bit. So what does Rotzen Mamish mean? It means that he desires it to the point that his nefesh is drawn to it. Is drawn to it, literally drawn to it. So it's not just a conceptual desire, a conceptual idea. Rotzen Mamish means that he desires something to the point that he's drawn to it, mamish, literally. The yitel adover, and he leans toward it, he inclines toward it, the dover ahu, I'm sorry, he inclines to that thing, li'dovik elov ulhasige, to attach to it, and lasige, to acquire it. So in other words, it's a rotzen that's an active rotzen. It's a desire that's traveling toward, it's extending, the nefesh is drawn to it, to the point that you go attached to it to acquire whatever it is that desire wants. The zeu inyone de koyach zeh, this is the inyan, this is the personality, this is the nature of this faculty called ratzon. Shahu ha'atiyah, it's the inclination, or the hatiyah is inclination, v'hamshacha, the being drawn, la'eze dover, to something. He's basically dissecting the anatomy of desire and ratzon and will. What is will? The will, when someone wants something, let's go the other way around. If you don't want something, you're not drawn to it. You're not driven. You're not going to acquire it. You're not interested. Let's say someone makes you an offer or something, and it's not appealing to you, and your ratzon is not stimulated. So it could be a good thing, but you have no connection. You're not going to pursue it, basically. In one word, pursue it. Ratzon, by definition, he says, is a force that drives you to pursue toward that thing, to acquire it. That's what ratzon is. It's easier to understand when there's lack of ratzon, so you understand when you don't have it. When you have it, most of us take it for granted. I want something, I go get it. You want a drink of water. So you go to the sink, you go to the refrigerator, you go get a drink of water. We don't think about it. But what's happening? Ratzon is the driving force of the nefesh. If a person, God forbid, if you remember, he may quote it here. In volume 1, he said there was a machla, an illness, forgot what the name was, where a person doesn't have the will. I mean, I think he called it mania, if I recall correctly. Now, we're not just talking about being depressed. There's some illness where there's no desire. A person is completely in a state of almost like a zombie. Everything is functioning, but there's no will. There's no desire to do anything. Rahman al-Islam. So it could be completely intact, and yet there's no desire. More specifically, we all have this. There are things you want, there are things you don't want. So he's explaining what desire actually does. So what it does is ratzon mamish, the first level. The actual, when ratzon is activated, we're not talking about the second level, the first level. Ratzon that's activated, ratzon mamish, to repeat again, when he desires something to the point that he's drawn to it literally, and he inclines to attach to it, to acquire it. This is the nature or the essence or the nature, the personality of this faculty called ratzon shu'atiyah v'amshacha le'ezeh davar. The inclination, the pursuit, if you wish, inclination, the being drawn to, the pursuit. I'm looking for the right English words. I think all of them fit towards le'ezeh davar, whatever it may be. It could be a cup of water. It could be to become a baki b'shas, lahavdil. But that's what ratzon does. V'hinei, and now, ha'atiyah v'amshacha shebekayach haratzon. They're very precise words. Hatiyah again literally means inclination to lean toward, but here I would say it's like the pursuit. Hatiyah means you were neutral before the ratzon, and now you're inclined to go this way. Now inclined is a weak word. Here inclination means hatiyah, that you're actually driven towards something. So if you're neutral, like someone says, I'm neutral, there's no hatiyah. As soon as you say hatiyah means you're already, sometimes the word hatiyah is used. If someone says, so what's your decision? You say, I don't have a decision yet, but I'm leaning toward doing it, or I'm leaning toward not doing it. So hatiyah has many meanings, but essentially it's not neutral anymore. In this case, hatiyah here, I would say, is more than just I'm leaning toward. It means you're inclined, it means you're driven and pursuing a particular approach. V'hamshacha is even stronger than hatiyah. Hatiyah would be the inclination, the literal translation. Hamshacha means you're extending, you're drawn. Hamshacha could mean transmitting, but hamshacha here means you're being drawn there. So he says that this hatiyah and hamshacha and koyach haratzon, in the power of desire that we're talking about, now will, hari ein ze ma sheba mishum tam shel hasoga v'haskala. Where does this come from? Why do you desire something? Why is it that you're no longer neutral and you're ready to be drawn toward this? He says it's not coming. This is not something that comes due to a reason that is a comprehensible and understandable reason. It's not based on seichel. Shenemar shatam yesi b'saratzon. To say that the reason is the cause for the desire. That's not the case. Because if that was the case, for us, if the reason was the cause for the desire, then you would have to say that if you don't have the reason, maybe a logical, rational reason, there won't be a desire, because desire is based on a reason. And in that case, where the cause for the desire is a reason, then the reason is the cause, and the ratzon is the effect. However, that's not the way it is here. He's not ruling out that you could have a desire that's a result of a tam, of a reason. He's saying here, when we talk about pure ratzon, the pure nature of, undiluted nature of desire is not a ratzon based on tam. That's what he's saying here. Ela inyan ratzon hu, and what are we talking about here? What is the ratzon he's discussing here? It's a desire that comes on its own. It's not due to a reason, that a logical, rational reason. Which means that which without any cause of a reason, any reason, for no reason at all, he desires or wants and is drawn to it. Is drawn to what he desires. By the way, all this now is already the Frierdiker Rebbe's explanation in Ayin Beis. This is not from Ayin Beis. The Ayin Beis stopped, or essentially by Ratzon Mesubah. The Frierdiker Rebbe is now analyzing. He's going to explain this whole piece in chapter 64 of Ayin Beis. Remember that. Okay. Now I know I have my own question right away that I'm sure some of you have. What is this type of desire? Every desire seems to have a reason. If I want to drink a water, it's because I'm thirsty. It's not because I want it. I'm thirsty. That's the tam that I go ahead and go take water. If I want to take a walk, because I have pleasure walking. There's a reason.
Maybe the thirsty itself is the ratzon.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just pointing out that it's not, I'm not clear exactly where he's going here, but he's saying clearly, because I'm assuming, if I recall correctly from Ayin Beis back then, he's talking about desires that are deep in the soul. Like, why do you want to have a home? So most people say to have shelter, that when it's raining or snowing, we shouldn't expose to the elements. But it's deeper than that. I think he wants to go to ritzenis that are fundamental to a human being, that are essential to us. Not because, like, I can come to you right now and say to you, hey, I have an interesting book. You want to read it? And you say, yeah, let me read it. That may not be the ratzon there. There's a reason. Anyway, I don't want to speculate. I just want to point out, because reading it, I'm assuming that all of you are thinking the same thing. That what's the distinction here? Why can't we say, so what? So there's a tam l'ratzon. But that would basically mean that Chabad is dictating Kesed instead of Kesed dictating Chochmah. So remember, in the human being, this is going to be harder. In the Eibishter, it makes total sense, because there was no faculties before there was a ratzon. First, he wanted existence, and now there's existence. You can't say that the reason for his ratzon is because he's thirsty. So Lamaila, this works very well. First, you need ratzon, then you come to reason. But in the human beings, there could be a reason that leads to a ratzon. I'm just somewhat commenting right now. As you know, I don't like to jump to any conclusions. We didn't finish yet. Just wanted to point it out, because right now it's still not clear exactly where he's going. Is he talking about us? He's talking about ratzon l'mayla. But clearly he's made a distinction between a ratzon with a tam, and he says that, what we're talking here is the ratzon that is mitzad atzmei.
Is the ratzon after reason, or ratzon even without reason?
He says he's not discussing the ratzon after reason here. He says, Eina inyan kain. That's not the true nature of ratzon. That's what he's saying here.
But he was very careful by the Eibishter when he before he had a ratzon, he had something similar to a ratzon. I forgot how it was expressed. He came
Nesava, Kadosh Baruch Hu, Nesava.
Yes, so maybe he's pushing in that direction.
Maybe. You know what? Let's not come to any conclusions. We'll see. I just wanted to, as I'm reading it, I just wanted to reassure you and affirm that needs clarity. But let's continue. We'll get there. So what is it? We're talking about that means something that for no reason at all, no matter what reason, that he desires and is drawn to it, to what he desires. Again, this is all the Frierdiker Rebbe now. He says, he's qualifying. Well, it's only because neshamas, souls, have the mile of tikkun. What's tikkun? Tikkun is the elam tikkun where everything has a function, everything has a purpose. Things are not just wild. Tikkun is the opposite of toyu. In toyu, it's chaotic. Tikkun, that means there's order, there's purpose, there's focus. So he's saying, since neshamas have the mile of tikkun, shuhu iskalus veiskashus pnimi, which is an inner interconnectivity and an inner connection. In other words, it's not just desires going any way they want. It's not like someone is just following whatever their wild desire is. And he's going to explain now what this is. He says, the Zeh Klal. He didn't finish the sentence, he says, but he's going to come back to it in a minute. He's explaining what tikkun is. The Zeh Klal, this is the rule. Toyu hem anfin mispardim. The world of Toyu, not tikkun, is anfin mispardim. These are separate branches. This is branches that diverge, basically. So they're not connecting, they diverge. Each one is going their own path. It's essentially a non-integrated system. The tikkun ma'ilose b'iskalus, and tikkun, its quality, its uniqueness, is hiskalus, the opposite. Amphim ispardim means separate, diverging branches, like everything going in different directions. And tikkun is hiskalus, everything interacting with each other. So if you took, for example, a machine, and you took it apart, and it's not working together, everything's doing its own thing, that's toyu. When it's a machine, all the parts are working together, that's tikkun. Same thing with the human body, same thing with nature. Okay, that's why the spheres, that's why we call toyu nukudim, because it's all points. Chachma is there, bina is there, das, chesed, gvura, teferes, but they're not working together with each other. Each one is an intense entity, but the eir is very strong, intense, and the keli is very fragile, which is part of it. But most importantly, in this context, they're not interactive. If you remember back in volume 1, he spoke about midas daim. He talked about everyone is self-contained. I don't need you. Shalish, shalish, shalach, shalach. Each one is on his own. In tikkun, everything is working with each other, like symbiotic relationship, like the human body. Is it possible the lungs work together with the heart and the heart together with the liver? Everything is interacting and interconnected. So there's gvura sheba chesed and chesed sheba gvura, etc. So tikkun ma'ilose b'iskalus v'shaychus kol hamadregas elazeh. It's iskalus, interconnectivity, and a relationship of all the levels, one with another. In contrast to the separate branches, the diverging branches of toyu. V'hanashamis. Now he's going back. Now hanashamis, the souls. Yesh ben ma'ilus hatikun. They have this quality of tikkun. L'chein. That's why hine b'keiches hanefesh. That's why in the faculties of the nefesh, we're talking about of the neshamas that are in the world of tikkun, where there's interconnectivity and relationship and all that. Ima yesem keiches mecholokim umuvdalim zemezeh. Even though the keiches are distinguished, they're separate, and they're apart. They're different faculties. You can't say the same faculty. Chachma is not bina, bina is not das, chesed is not gevura, etc. B'kol mokem. So even though they're distinct, nevertheless, yesh lehem yichus pnimi. Yichus or yachas. Interesting, yichus. Anyway, bottom line is they have an internal relationship. a relationship, a connection. So they are separate entities, but they have a relationship with each other. They're interactive. Pnimi, internally. It's not superficially. Fundamental interrelationship. V'hu, what does that mean? He's spelling it out. The kol koyach, kolol v'kolol mukayach zolase. Every faculty encompasses and is encompassed by its neighbor. By neighbor, I mean by another faculty. A faculty apart from itself. So it's not just one is here and one is here and one is there, 10 different branches. Each one encompasses and is encompassed by its colleague, or you could say it's the other faculty. This is the structure. This is the way this is the structure of all the faculties in their core essence. Like the Alter Rebbe writes, the Peda Gimel, he's talking about Tanya, chapter 3 of Tanya. These are the words of the Alter Rebbe, V'hinei kol b'chinas u'madreges mishalosh elu nefesh ruach neshama. All these levels of these three, of nefesh, ruach, neshama, the three levels in the soul, klula me'eser, b'chinas keneged eser sfiras al yenis shenishtal shalom mehen, that they're all three are encompassed of all 10 levels that correspond to the 10 spheres. Shemishtal spheres, Elyenis, the higher 10 spheres, supernal 10 spheres. Shenishtal shlumahem, these faculties evolve from them. So in other words, in the Maila, in the spheres, in Atzilus, or in the Elamis Elyenim, it's called spheres, divine attributes. And from them evolved, Alter Rebbe says, the 10 faculties, and each one encompasses all 10. I think we should stop here because it's going to go a whole discussion in Tanya here. This is basically going to go through Tanya. I think we should stop right here before the Tanya. I gave a few lines extra, but that's what we'll do. Now, just for the context, let me just sum it up. All this is going to still go back to Rotzen, but the Frierdiker Rebbe is now elaborating on the fact that Rotzen affects all the faculties, but by neshamas, because they come from Tikkun, he's going to explain there's an interconnectivity between the faculties, and I assume also with the faculty of Rotzen, but still doesn't negate the fact that Rotzen is apart from them. I believe that's where he's going here with this, but we'll learn it inside. So we'll stop here, middle of page 52 in Sadik Dalet, and we'll continue tomorrow.